So let's go ahead and officially kick things off. Welcome to everyone that's here and everyone that's trickling in. My name is Nick Cheetnay. I'm the president of the Chicago Interactive Marketing Association. And this evening we've partnered with a friend of CIMA's, Joe Kowan of Spark Foundry. And we're going to be having a discussion around the future of advertising, specifically as it relates to the future of media buying. This event is sponsored by AdTheorent. I am playing a dual role tonight, not just as the president of CIMA, but the senior vice president of sales for AdTheorent. It is a machine learning platform for advertising. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we start and begin our discussion with Joe. First and foremost, I want to thank the board of directors at the Chicago Interactive Marketing Association. We are 21 board members strong. Most of our board members have been on board with us for less than a year. So we have a newfound energy within CIMA. And this year, we're excited to bring you a wonderful lineup of philanthropic, educational, and social events. In the very near future, the community will receive more information about a happy hour that we will have in support of Off the Street Club. In addition, we will be having in memoriam of our dearly departed friend, Sean Finnegan. We will be having an event in late June, early July at one of his favorite Irish pubs downtown, where we will be honoring him. There will be some celebrity guest appearances, and we will be making some announcements that evening. Later on in the summertime, we will be bringing back the coveted Chicago Interactive Marketing Association yacht cruise that takes place on a luxury yacht on Lake Michigan. We will then have our golf outing in October. We will have a larger in-person educational event in the autumn as well. That will be a panel that will be discussing all things related to metaverse. And last but not least, we will wrap up our year with our holiday party that everyone looks forward to. In addition to everything that we're working on, I want to introduce our new educational committee for CIMA, beginning with our Vice President of Education. Her name is Jacqueline Kuehl. She is a professor of digital media at DePaul University and runs that concentration there. She's also been a friend of CIMA's for a long time. We have Nishat Ali, who is a marketer turned educator who recently got the itch to come back into the marketing and advertising world. She too is part of Spark Foundry as a senior associate. And last but not least, our friend Katie Killebrew, who's also part of Spark Foundry. She will be the moderator of moderators this evening. She will be fielding your questions as you ask them. And then we will save some time at the end to make sure to address as many questions as possible. So my thanks to AdTheorent, my thanks to the CIMA board members, and especially the educational committee and everyone that was involved in making today's event happen. And finally, our sincere thanks to our good friend, Joe Kowan, who will be sharing his thoughts with us. And we will kick things off by asking Joe to tell us a little bit about what it is that you do as the Executive Vice President of Digital Solutions for Precision and Technology at Spark Foundry.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this. So a little bit about me. So I'm fortunate that I get to oversee the entirety of Spark's precision marketing discipline, which is essentially real-time data-driven media buying, mostly through programmatic tool sets. But really, my role is about enabling a team of absolute experts and helping them be successful in this area so that our clients are successful. And this is one of the most complex areas of media. And I've been working in various agency and ad tech roles since around 2005. And now I get to work with some of the smartest marketing professionals out there. It's really awesome.
That's great to hear. And this evening, as we had mentioned, talking about the future of advertising, let's begin a bit more high level and look at what the future of advertising means in your world. As it relates to media buying, what does that mean for all of us on the call right now?
Sure. So it's a big topic. I think let's break it down. I think you start with the biggest trend in the world of media recently, which is the concept of platform-based buying, right, and the expansion of that theme. So publishers have become platforms have become publishers, retailers have become publishers and platforms, right? And that trend continues. And so I'll throw out a fairly bold statement here, but I believe that everything that can be bought programmatically will be eventually, right? So with very few exceptions. And don't get me wrong, that does not mean that all media will run through DSPs and SSPs and things like that, right? In fact, some of the most important and impactful activations are not syndicated through platforms, but rather integrated through content teams, right? So that continues to be an extremely important part of the overall media portfolio. But platform-based buying of pretty much any media that can be platform enabled, that is the trend that that we're seeing and we're following. And I think specifically with programmatic, you have to think about the early days of programmatic, and there was an accountability issue, right? Programmatic began as an efficiency play. It was all about cheap media, right? Certainly that has changed completely. Programmatic needed to reach maturity, and it has. The tool sets that we use have reached maturity, and now we're at a place where we're trading some of the most valuable media on the planet programmatically, right? So programmatic is the pipes, and that's what we use to transact media. But so I think for this group, if that's the case, that we're moving into this platform world, then I think you need to think about the talent, the talent requirements to operate successfully in this world, because that has changed considerably, right? Being able to operate in a single platform is even different than what we're talking about with a multitude of platforms, right? So being able to optimize across multiple platforms in a measured, meaningful, sophisticated manner delivers tremendous advantage. And so really that's one of the key disciplines that we're cultivating. So from a talent perspective, those operators, people that can actually do that, program individual platforms and look across those platforms for meaningful opportunities to exploit performance gains for their marketers' campaigns, like that's a massive skill set and talent that we're cultivating. And then you have to think about the data, right? Because the reason platforms are valuable is because of the audience selection that they enable, right? And the companies who own that data and who proliferate that data are really underpinning a lot of the future of advertising, and will really thrive. And then I think also as you think about platform-based buying, something that's often overlooked is the power of marketplace clout and the understanding of the supply side. It's absolutely imperative to driving efficient, effective campaigns, right? So that's another discipline that we have to cultivate, and more media is traded through partnerships, right? Through bespoke partnerships rather than through some kind of open exchange construct. Not that open exchanges are going away, they definitely play a role, but the role is diminished as you view them in the context of the potential for deep, meaningful partnerships. So then finally, going back to the talent profile and the change, another major change is the need for data science, right? Data science is critical. Sorting through the volume of data that platform-based buying generates, it's just an epic workload. And so data science plays an incredibly valuable role, and it's an area that you can't do without in modern media buying. So very long-winded way of saying I would focus on the profile of the media buyer and the fundamental shift that we've seen there, right? Because now you've got platform specialization, you've got data science specialization, and of course you have marketplace and negotiation specialization. And when those three areas work together perfectly, that's what delivers the real optimization of campaign performance.
And thank you for that background. And can you please also expand on how the future of media buying will lend to platform efficiencies with buying and optimizing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as it relates to efficiencies, I think, like I said, the early days of programmatic, it was for the buy side, it was all about efficiency, right? And certainly for the sell side, right? The sell side, looked at programmatic as a really interesting way to put automation into their sales force and to automate yield optimization of media assets. On the buy side, we saw those efficiencies early on and realized them, but now, as programmatic has become more mature and more mainstream, now it's all about the efficacy, right? So now we're looking at each platform and the bespoke value that they bring to the overall portfolio, right? And so yes, it's sort of table stakes that it's a highly efficient area, and we've leaned into the human plus machine augmentation and the results from that, right? And that continues. But really, it's become about the efficacy gains that we have through that audience selection that I talked about earlier. So when you ask about optimization, it's optimization is managing a portfolio of media platforms and tactics in real time, pitting those publishers and platforms up against each other to further the outcomes of the marketer.
Yeah, and to stay on platforms for just a little bit, you had talked a bit about efficacy. Two-part question. So with the trends in the space moving towards these platforms, let's expand on efficacy a little bit more. How will that impact the efficacy of ad campaigns? And also, we can't forget about consumer privacy. How will it expand on consumer privacy?
Well, I think as it relates to efficacy, as long as those platforms allow some degree of interoperability, we do think efficacy will continue to increase with this trend, right? So that's good. Walled gardens remain challenging, but with underlying audience infrastructure, we can navigate through that challenge, right? So the platform trend is a good one for marketers, and for the ecosystem overall. Efficiency, however, when you introduce multiple platforms, does take a hit, right? The ability to operate across multiple platforms is not an easy one, right? But so when you lean in with automation and underlying reporting infrastructure and data infrastructure, then it can be done without a big efficiency hit. So those two things are great, and that's moving in the right direction. On the consumer privacy piece, it's super important and more top of mind than ever. I'll just say it's incumbent on advertisers and platforms to respect consumer privacy first and foremost, right? That's sort of table stakes, and it's a much bigger imperative now than it has been in the past. So really looking at the data infrastructure, looking at the audience, those companies that can manufacture audiences online, their connection with the consumer, their connection to opted in marketing experiences, that's absolutely critical, and you know that's going to be a linchpin for success in this space.
We've been talking about the cookieless future for a while now. Do you think that marketers understand what's in store for the digital future, or is education still needed?
Yeah, so you know, keep in mind we've been educating marketers on the decline of cookies, the deprecation of cookies for almost a decade, right? With the proliferation of iPhones and iOS, you know, and in-app experiences, cookie deprecation has been on the rise. So I think the, you know, big misconception is that it's a light switch, right? That suddenly cookies are gone. Don't get me wrong, changes to the browsers, you know, that definitely creates some disruption. But you know, I would say sophisticated marketers, you know, certainly over the past 5 years, have been working to future-proof their campaigns and their marketing efforts for the inevitable, you know, decline of cookie match, right? So that's the, you know, so that's marketing programs that are working with companies like Epsilon, right, that shore up their audience infrastructure in a completely cookieless manner. You know, so I don't think marketers, or at least sophisticated marketers, are going to be, you know, shocked or you know, completely disrupted by this, because it's, you know, it's something that's been happening for quite some time. We've been educating, we've been forging partnerships, we've been taking the right steps to future-proof on this subject.
And other than, you know, the misunderstanding around this just being a light switcher happening overnight, what do you think is some of the other biggest misunderstandings about the cookieless future?
You know, I think there's a lot of talk about, you know, the a loss of efficacy, right? In terms of, so why are we buying on platforms if we lost the ability to target cookies, right? And I think that's a you know, it's a shame for that gets thrown around, because the reality is, whether we're talking about targeting on a one-to-one basis or on a cohort level, right, or whatever it might be, the efficacy gains versus traditional media are massive, right? So the opportunity for the marketer is still a massive one, and even if that requires operating at a cohort level, you know, it's still there's still urgency to get there, and get to that level of targeting, segmentation, and then the insights, right? The data that's generated by interacting with consumers at that level, and bringing that back into the campaign planning stage, and the, you know, the overall insight, the overall execution of it, right? That's a huge opportunity for marketers. So you know, I don't think it's fair to, you know, to look at audience targeting as if it's, you know, it's going to go, we're going to go back in time or something like that. It's not happening. We're there. We may take a small step back in terms of cookie deprecation, but we're there.
What do you think data-driven media buying will look like then in a near-term cookieless reality?
Well, it's, you know, it's exactly what we're talking about, right? It's everything we do has and continues to be data-driven media buying, right? With platforms, we're doing data-driven media buying in real time, right? So that enables that approach. So it doesn't really change. Again, we're moving, you know, with cookieless, you know, a lot of what we're doing shifts to cohort level. I think measurement is probably the most impacted area, and I think that's a really interesting space to watch. You know, as a trend, I think measurement becomes more dynamic, more multifaceted. You know, you look back 5-6 years ago, we were told that multi-touch attribution, MTA, was going to be the silver bullet that solves everything, and then, you know, everybody realizes, oops, that was sort of predicated on cookie measurement, and so moving back towards econometric, media mix modeling, right? Like things like that are going to help us, you know, better optimize our campaigns. I think that's a really interesting space to watch, and sort of a byproduct of cookie deprecation.
So with everything we've discussed, buyers and sellers joining us on the call this evening would benefit from your point of view on how the industry can future-proof its media buying strategies. Can you expand a little bit more on your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so it's the crystal ball question, right? You want me to rub the crystal ball?
That's exactly it.
Yeah, got it. So as I said, I think the trend with publishers becoming platforms and vice versa continues, right? So I see more of that, not less, and probably reaches a tipping point where if you want to be a valuable publisher, you have to bring data assets to the table, and so I think we'll see more of that. I think cookies are pretty much gone, save for a smattering of desktop computers that are still running Internet Explorer 6.0, which is probably our entire government. I think the concept of discrete audience segmentation and an understanding at a cohort level, I think that spans across platforms, but I think it's underpinned by actual PII data, right? So going back to those companies that can manage opted-in consumer relationships, right? I think that becomes commonplace in terms of like addressable media targeting. And so I think if you think about it like that, then you really think about what's the future of a media plan, right? A media plan just becomes but a media plan becomes a portfolio of tactics across a slew of platforms, right? Each tactic bringing a unique value for the marketer, and the marketer, the role of the precision marketer is to optimize that portfolio in order to extract the best, the best campaign performance ultimately. I think, like I said, I think probably 5 years, we're seeing measurement a little bit differently. I hope that the ads served as registered by an ad server, I hope that metric just dies a slow, painful death. I hope we're not talking about impressions delivered anymore. I hope we're talking about engagement or something more impactful. And then the last thing I would say that's a really interesting topic is I also think the concept of custom algorithm becomes more commonplace, right? So if you think about marketers that have made considerable investments in their marketing infrastructure, right? So invested in data science and MarTech to segment out all their different audience segments and extract the most value and use different messaging, different treatments, different personalization, right? Marketers that have invested in that, to take all that logic and simply throw it into an off-the-shelf bidding solution, seems like a waste, right? So the concept of custom algorithms, the ability to customize the bidding algorithm based on the complexities of that audience segmentation schema, right? Like, I think that's really interesting. And I think, looking back into my crystal ball, I think we'll see more, it's not for everyone, right? It's for most marketers, it's like a sledgehammer and a mosquito. But I think for the majority of sophisticated marketers out there who've really invested in MarTech and segmentation and understand the nuances of their individual audience segments, they're going to want a bidding solution that matches to that that complexity on the segmentation side.
You mentioned briefly we might take a step back. Let's hope we don't just go back and measure more vanity KPIs, but with the changes coming to data collection, do you believe that KPIs and performance benchmarks will need to be reset to a more accurate depiction of success?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for sure, there are a lot of KPIs that were built off of cookie-based, pixel fires, cookie drops, and the measurement of, a particular the efficacy of a campaign based on a particular cookie, right? And that has to change, and that has, right? So that's something that's been evolving over time, because again, like when you're thinking about a full media ecosystem, and only a limited desktop allows for that kind of cookie tracking and measurement, then obviously you need to evolve your approach, and I think most sophisticated marketers have. So yeah, certainly I think there's more to come on that side, and I, my hope is, again, we're not looking at simply ad server registered impression counts, right? We're looking at more meaningful KPIs, but yeah, benchmarks do need to be reset. That's for sure, and I think that's a work in progress.
Well, thank you so much. The last 30 minutes or so have been extremely productive and informative, and we appreciate your background. I want to turn it over to Katie. Katie, do we have any questions starting to trickle in from the attendees?
Yep, so we have two right now. So one, Joe, do you think that with cohorts using hashed email as an identifier could be a threat to how we look at consumer privacy or how we look at PII data, which we can't look at PII data, but how would you go about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think there's a lot of talk about what clean room solutions can bring to the table, right? And so if that clean room solution is based on hashed emails, what does that mean from a consumer privacy perspective? I think there's a lot of questions there, but ultimately, we have some of the foremost experts in how to manage that extremely sensitive data, and so I put a lot of confidence in that discipline, and I want to make sure that any audience targeting that my marketers are working with is compliant and is handled by the best of the best in terms of respecting consumer privacy.
What excites you most about the future of advertising, and in talking about how we look at platforms or the media landscape, or how we even look at consumer privacy? What excites you the most moving into kind of this next decade that threw us all for a loop 2 years ago?
That's a big question. What excites me the most? So I would say there's a big opportunity in game advertising. In-game advertising is a huge opportunity. It's very exciting. I think we've only scratched the surface of what we could do programmatically in that area, and it's another really interesting one to talk about, because the concept of respecting consumer privacy is never more impactful and important than it is as it relates to a gaming experience, right? So because it's table stakes. If a marketer tries to come in into a gaming environment without respecting consumer privacy, it's a death sentence, right? So I think that's a really interesting space to watch, and how it shakes out from an ad tech and platform trading perspective, but certainly an exciting one, right? Because I don't have the stats in front of me, but the amount of time being consumed, the amount of time being spent and media consumed, if you think about everyone playing online games, it's massive, and it's been growing, and it's in terms of the advertising opportunity, I think it's I wouldn't say untapped, but I think there's a lot more room to grow.
To add to that, I actually can tell you what that stat is. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of being invited by my colleague, Jackie, to present to her class. 13 hours and 28 minutes on average per day.
There it is.
So more than half our day is spent in some connected capacity.
Yeah, there it is. Yep.
Katie,
all right.
Yeah, Katie, we have some. I think we have some other questions trickling in.
Yep. So Joe, let's go back to your crystal ball. Let's take that out again. Put on your magic hat, and if you had a magic wand, how would you conduct us to think about our KPIs as it relates to measurement or optimization or frequency, and how we should be looking at our overarching KPIs, not only as like the media buyers but also for the platform sellers too, and how they should be talking to their and selling their products.
Got it. Yeah, really good question. I would say always start with the business results, right? Like, what are we trying to do for the business, right? What's the products that we're trying to sell? What's the impact we're trying to have on the consumer? And then you start to work your way backwards to think about the proxies for that performance, right? So like, what's the best proxy to know that consumer was influenced, right, by the brand message, right? So then you start to think about those proxies, and you can really start to hone in on the signals that best represent the proxies that best represent the business outcome, right? And so as long as you start with the business outcome that you're trying to drive and how much that's worth, right, you should end up with the right KPIs. I would say, it's really important to educate marketers on how some KPIs can be deceiving, right? And so I think, if you look at the early days of digital marketing, right, where everybody's really excited about a click-through rate, I would consider that a deceptive KPI, right? Because we know that that's not a true indicator of business performance. It can be it's not something that you should never look at, right? But to call that a KPI was a big miss, and that unfortunately went on for quite some time. And so I think, educating marketers on all the potential KPIs that are out there, looking at the data signals, right, and trying to always get as close to the business result as possible, the business outcome as possible. That would be my guidance for how to think about KPIs and sort of measurement frameworks.
Great. So I know a couple of years ago, the big buzzword was DMP, and then the big buzzword became CDPs, and now everybody's thinking about clean rooms. What are your predictions around kind of should marketers go with the DMP or should marketers go with the CDP, and what are your thoughts on the distinguishing between both or looking at both?
I just wish we had more acronyms. That's my only wish. Look, I think data management, the discipline around data management and audience management and segmentation and the data science work that goes into that, like, that's only evolving. Now, whether you position that as you're selling a DMP infrastructure or it's kind of irrelevant, right? You really have to look at the discipline around audience segmentation and how to think about audiences and think about the impact that your messages will have on those audiences. And then you just evaluate, the best tech providers that can enable that discipline to operate at its maximum, right? And so does everybody need a DMP? I don't know. The CDP, actually getting if there's an opt-in, if you're making sure that your website is compliant and all that, yeah, that's absolutely critical, right? So yeah, I think it's the discipline of evaluating the full ad tech martech stack, right, that a marketer needs as a consultant, right? They need someone who can consult them on the full martech stack and all the options available. And it's not good enough to simply say, well, I'm going all in with this one company and they provide a bunch of these things, so I think I'm good.
Katie, Joe, thank you so much. Katie, how are you looking on any additional questions that might be trickling in?
No other questions that I see. I have one for you, Joe. What do you think is the best way of how I feel like we've talked a lot about cookieless, and while I do think that is important, I also want to bring to mind the topic of frequency and how we should be looking at the frequency of our campaigns, given that we could be in multiple platforms, multiple data providers or whatnot, and making sure that if we don't have a DMP or a CDP, how we should be monitoring and measuring our frequency properly so that we're not oversaturating the market and that we're ensuring that we're giving the best consumer experience possible. So what are your thoughts around frequency?
Well, I think what you just said, right? Making sure that we're respecting the consumer experience, right? That should be front and center. So, I look at some of the, sort of legacy reach curves and, and frequency guidance. And I think a lot of that gets turned on its head as it relates to data enabled platform traded media. But I think, it also depends on the format and where we're reaching the consumer. So ultimately it's, determining frequency is a very dynamic conversation, and rigor, right? It's not it's never going to be okay, this is the frequency for this campaign. It should not be, right? If you're setting one frequency for a campaign across different creative, different formats, different vehicles, it's a terrible idea. So it needs to be dynamic. It needs to be, it needs to be put through the context of the consumer experience, as well as the efficiency of the campaign and the balance. And it's something that should always be looked at. I think you could go to the other extreme where you go over frequency and you can burn a relationship with the consumer, right? That's not going to be respected either. So I think, it's a very important conversation, but it needs to stay dynamic. It can't be something that's fixed, set and forget. That's just not a modern way to think about frequency.
We have another one that came through. What types of non-cookie based targeting would you see being successful in the future? So I know that there's a lot of ID-free products rolling out, and I know a lot of platforms have kind of their ID-free opportunities as well. So what types do you see successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think you've got to look back to the KPI and the business outcome and what you're trying to do, and then look at those signals and those proxies that we talked about, right? To determine, okay, what are the tactics that are going to get me as close to that outcome as possible? So contextual is massive, right? Obviously, lookalike models will remain an important component. You think about just buying context, just buying a certain section of a site. You might get a very small niche audience out of doing that, right? But that audience is so engaged that there's a value from that particular component of the buy. So my recommendation is you have a full portfolio of all those different tactics, and you're constantly monitoring performance across those tactics and across the platforms, because those tactics are offered across multiple platforms. It's not just one that's going to have the best contextual solution or whatever it is. So the rigor of a precision marketer is to examine that performance across all those tactics and figure out what is truly the best proxy for the business result that I'm looking for, or the best signal to get at the proxy for the business result. And that's how you need to optimize. And when you can start to really plug that into an auto optimization routine, that's when you can scale a meaningful, an effective campaign, I think.
Wonderful. Joe, thank you. I'm gonna give one more chance for any of the attendees to ask any last remaining questions before we wrap things up. And I believe one trickled in.
Yep. So as programmatic buying in the app-based CTV landscape continues to gain ground, how do you help integrate the traditional video teams with precision teams, really within the agency?
Ooh, where are all the softball questions? What's going on here, Nick? No, it's a really good one. It's a really good one. I think, when we think about when we think about investment teams and you think about the discipline and the specialty, there's no one on there's no one on the planet that has better cultivated the rigor around supplies, the supply landscape, right? Negotiations, understanding publishers, understanding, how to strike a great deal with a publisher on a marketer's behalf. And so, like I said before, moving into a platform-centric world, there's those three key talent profiles, I think. I mean, there's more than that, but when I talk about those, the talent profiles that you really need to cultivate, like I said, marketplace is definitely up there, right? That's key, because we're moving away from the open exchange, right? We're moving away from the concept of, well, I'll just click a bunch of boxes in a DSP and off to the races. More and more media is traded in a pre-negotiated, relationship-centric manner, right? And so who do you want doing those kind of deals? You want the people that do it the best, and those are investment teams. So I'm really bullish on how platform operations and marketplace and data science all come together, because I think each one of those brings a distinct intrinsic value that you can't operate in a sophisticated manner in a platform world without those three working together seamlessly.
Very glad somebody asked that question, actually.
It's a good one. It's a really good one.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap things up here for this evening. I would have to speculate that people are itching to get outside and enjoy the pleasant weather that we've been having. So on behalf of CIMA,
you deserve it.
Yes, absolutely. And our sponsor, AdTheorent. Joe, we want to thank you once again for being a friend to CIMA and for contributing to CIMA. We hope to see you again in the very near future for another one of our educational events. And I want to thank Katie for your help, the rest of the educational committee at CIMA, Gage, and everyone on the support and interactive teams. And once again, our thanks to all of our friends at Spark Foundry. So I wish all of you all the best. And we look forward to seeing you very, very soon, and watch out for the newsletter that's going to be coming out later this month. That will have a link to this recorded session. So thanks to everyone, and we will be in touch very, very soon. Good night.